Practice Exam 3, Part 1. You should have the practice exam with you. I will not be writing down all of the questions, but I will just read some out and answer them and make some general statements about how to go about answering questions like this. So you're prepared for Real Exam 3, which will be on Monday the 4th, 2:45 p.m. All right. Again, the actual exam is very similar to the practice exam, Part A, Part B, Part C, with the same point breakdown. So Part A for the practice as well as the real exam, definitions and questions, 54 points. And then translations for 42 points. Translations 42 points. And then Part C, validity and invalidity, 64 points. Just like the practice exam, the real exam, the validity and invalidity section will ask you to construct a proof, to prove a theorem, and thirdly, to use the model universe method to prove of a particular argument that it is invalid. Okay? So, starting with section A, definitions and questions. First question is, what is a singular sentence? These are just reading the definitions from the book. A singular sentence is any sentence containing a name, right? But make sure you know the definitions of singular sentence, propositional function, categorical sentence, and so on. Question 2, identify the following as either a singular, a categorical sentence, or a propositional function. The sentence is, dead people don't leave fingerprints. So some general comments on this. Singular sentences, as I said, are sentences containing a name, right? Remember, singular sentences are sentences which predicate of some individual, the individual that is named. Dan is Australian, right? The FBI is a good institution, right? The FBI there stands for a name, just like Dan did, and Dan is Australian. Okay, so this one is, dead people don't leave fingerprints. This is a categorical sentence. Why? Remember what categoricals are. We were introduced to them in Unit 12. Categorical sentences are sentences where the subject and the predicate are both classes. Right? So you already have the distinction between categorical sentence and singular sentence. Singular sentence, you're predicating of some one individual. Dan is Australian. Predicating is Australian of the individual Dan. Right? Australians are surfers, a paradigmatic categorical. The subject is Australians, right? The whole class or set of individuals. Classes and sets, those are equivalent for us as explained in the text. So what's this one? Dead people don't leave fingerprints. This is a categorical because the subject is not some one individual, but dead people, right? The entire class of dead people, right? I only gave you half the definition there, but a categorical sentence is a sentence where the subject and predicate are both classes, and that expresses an inclusion or exclusion relation between those two classes, right? And so that's the proper definition of it. More elaborately, the relation between the two classes in a categorical proposition is it's inclusion or exclusion. Right? Inclusion is those in the subject class are included within the predicate class. Exclusion is those in the subject class are excluded from the predicate class. And there's going to be 4 types of them because this inclusion and exclusion can be, in both cases, universal or particular. Universal inclusion, universal exclusion, particular inclusion, particular exclusion. That gives us 4 types of categoricals. This is important for the next question, right? The 2 types of inclusion, again, are the A and the I form, the first 2 vowels of the word affirmo, affirming an inclusive relation, right? So it's A, F-F-I, R-M-O, affirmo. A is universal inclusion, I is particular inclusion. A, all Australians are surfers, is an example. All Australians are included in the predicate class. Some Australians are surfers, that's an I form. Particular inclusion, some of those in the subject class, Australians, are included in the predicate class. The exclusion ones are they're the E and the O, the two vowels of the word nego, right? I deny. Nego, those two are the exclusion ones. And again, the first letter of the word, E, the first vowel, in N-E-G-O, nego, the first vowel is universal exclusion, the second vowel, O, is particular exclusion, right? Universal exclusion, no Australians are surfers, right? Which says all Australians are not surfers, right? That's the E form. No Australians are surfers, E form, universal, because it's universal exclusion. Some Australians are not surfers, that would be the O form, right? Dead people don't leave fingerprints. All of the, that's, what is that? Universal exclusion. It doesn't ask this, so don't write this for an answer, but if you were asked what it is, it's dead people don't leave fingerprints. Looks like universal exclusion. All of those in the subject class, dead people, are excluded from the class of things that leave fingerprints, right? You have to pick up the don't here. Not in this particular question. It doesn't ask you if it's A, E, I, or O, but the next one of them, later one does. Just using another example. You have to recognize that don't is a negation, right? As Clank explains in the textbook, Unit 12, you have to have the classes as positive classes. So your predicate class can't be things that don't leave fingerprints. It has to be things that do leave fingerprints. The class of things that don't leave fingerprints is too large. Right? So it's E form, that particular one. But anyway, the answer to the question is simply, it's a categorical sentence. That's what they ask for. 3, pick out and symbolize the propositional function in the following. Harold is an infinitely complex creature. Okay, the method for obtaining a propositional function from a singular sentence is simply to delete the name and replace the name with the variable x. Okay, so the answer to the question is x is an infinitely complex creature. That is the propositional function. Remember, propositional functions are incomplete, right? They are not sentences themselves, which means for us they are not true nor false in themselves. They need completion either by the propositional function taking as a substitution instance, the individual variable x taking a substitution instance some individual, like Harold, or you can bind the propositional function with a quantifier to get a quantified statement. That's the other way of making sentences from propositional functions. Okay? But this question, please read the questions closely. It asks you, pick out and symbolize the propositional function in the following. So you should write, x is an infinitely complex creature. Then, second part of the answer, symbolize just I, x. Capital I, little x, right? X equals x is a infinitely complex creature. Question 4. Identify the following as either universal or existential. Not all... I don't know, in the toilet? Not all philosophers are wise. Okay? Take note of this for the exam. You're asked whether it's universal or existential. You are not given as an option the negation of a universal, the negation of an existential, right? So you have to sort of have in mind here the categorical, quantifier, negation equivalences so that you can give one of those two answers. Right? The natural way to symbolize not all philosophers are wise is as the negation of all philosophers are wise, right? Which would be A form for all x. If x is a philosopher, then, please note the hook, x is wise, right? That's the A form. This is the translation of all philosophers are wise, and you would negate that. That would be the natural way to translate this and to think its form, as it were, to think its symbols. Not all philosophers are wise, but that doesn't give you the answer, right? Because this is not universal, this is a negation of universal. But this is equivalent to, right, this is the negation of an A obviously important for question 6, which we'll have in a minute as well. Negation of the A, what does that go to? Remember, A, E, I, O. A goes with O, that is, negation of A is equivalent to an O, negation of O equivalent to an I. Sorry, negation of an A equivalent to an O, negation of an O equivalent to an A, right? So not A, that's a not A, that's the negation of an A, goes with O. What's O form? Nay, go, that's exclusion, universal particular, E-O, particular exclusion. So the form is this, right? That's the form, right? Remember the universals go with a hook, existentials go with a dot. I got this, sorry. So substituting in the subject and predicate class, PX, WX. Translate this to make sure I've got the same thing. Not all philosophers are wise. Some philosophers are not wise. Right? That's what you get in 2 steps. There exists an X such that both X is a philosopher and X is not wise. That's how you say some philosophers are not wise. Right? So yes, those are equivalent. But I did that to get it into, right, this is now an existential statement, and that's the way you need to think it to get that answer. Not universal, but existential. Right? Identify the question 4. Identify the following, not all philosophers are wise, as either universal or existential. It's existential. Because these are the only 2 correct symbolizations, and this is not a universal, nor is it existential, so it's not one of the options. But this is the only one of the 2 correct symbolizations, which is an option you're giving. So it's properly an existential. Right, so kind of a trick question, but see how it goes. Okay, question 5. State whether the following is A, I, E, or O. There are no such things as witches. This is also a bit tricky because you might suspect that the best way to symbolize that is as a simple existential, or as the negation of a simple existential. That does not exist an X such that X is a witch. Right? It says, there are no such things as witches. That do not exist.
Can I do TV?
Yeah. There does not exist an X such that X is a witch. Okay. But, right, you're asked what its categorical form is. Right. The question says, is it A? Well, you need to realize that that's what you're being asked. You're asked whether the following is of the form A, I, E, or O. This is question 5, which means it's here taken as a categorical. A, E, I, and O, what are those? Those are the 4 forms of categoricals, which are relations between classes. So the way to see that this is a categorical, they're taking things as the subject class, right? Sometimes you don't. Sometimes we just assume the domain is things, but here they must be taking things as the subject class. So it's a relation between things that are things, if you will, and things that are witches. There are no such things as witches. So it's saying all of the things in the subject class, things, are excluded from the class of witches. So it is an E form, right? There are no such things as witches. It's going to be for all X. If X is a thing, then X is not a witch. Universal exclusion, E form. Okay? All right. I'll pause and come back for question 6.